Set in the Australian outback, BBC's The Tourist begins with an unnamed man fleeing a semi-truck, which eventually rams his car that he's driving, and sends the man to the hospital. And when he wakes up, he realizes that he doesn't know who he is because he has amnesia. We later learn that the unnamed man's name is Elliot Stanley, but at this point he doesn't know this information. While in the hospital, Elliot finds a piece of paper in his pocket, which says 26 230 Burnt Ridge Gloria's Diner, Table 5 on it. Also in the hospital, Elliot meets Helen Chambers, a traffic cop, and she tells him where Burnt Ridge is. Helen is a police officer who wants to help Elliot and prove to herself that she's capable. Her fiancé Ethan doesn't help her confidence, because he's constantly putting her down, and he's always needing her attention. Elliot travels to the diner on the note, and he meets a waitress named Lucy there. Elliot asks if he can use the restroom, but he's informed that the restroom isn't working currently, and he'll need to go across the street. While Lucy is showing him the way, an explosion occurs at the diner Elliot was just in. The explosion had to be for him, right? This isn't just a coincidence. At this point, we're introduced to a new character. It's an American with a cowboy hat, who visits the hospital that Elliot just left. He's looking for Elliot, but he won't reveal his name. His name is Billy, and he manages to give off some creepy serial killer vibes to the nurse on staff before leaving. He likes to use a variation of the same line on everyone he meets. It goes something like this. You know, my mother worked as a nurse. It's fine work you people do. Or, my mother worked as a parking attendant. It's fine work you people do. Turns out, he's the truck driver who rammed Elliot, but he wasn't able to finish him off or get what he was looking for because a car approached the scene when he was walking up. With Billy chasing after him, Elliot is trying to figure out who he is, and his new friend Lucy agrees to help him along the way, stating she's helping him because he's the most interesting thing to happen around these parts, which sounds like a lie. And that's because it is a lie. Her real name is Victoria, and she already knew Elliot previously, and she was the person who was behind the bomb at the diner. Elliot is having reoccurring dreams of a woman who turns towards him and smiles as she's walking away, but he can't remember who she is. With Victoria's help, Elliot retraces his steps by going to a gift shop he visited, as well as a petrol station. Outside the petrol station, he sees a koala toy strapped to a dumpster, and inside of it is a cell phone. The minute he finds the cell phone, it rings, and on the other end of the call is a man named Marco. Elliot knows Marco from his days working for an international drug cartel leader, Costa. Funny thing about Costa, he's a psychopath who microdoses LSD in his water bottle to improve his painting. This causes him to see his deceased brother, and he believes he's really talking to him. Marco is currently trapped in a barrel underground, and he calls Elliot for help. As a result, Elliot and Victoria go to find Marco, but he's dead by the time they reach him, because there was a dust storm and it clogged the tube he was using to breathe. At this point, Elliot realizes the signature that Victoria used on the helicopter waiver form matches the handwriting on the note that told him to go to the diner. This forces Victoria to come clean and tell him how they know each other. She also tells Elliot his name for the first time. She still lies a little bit because, she's not a truthful person. We find out that the whole thing kicked off because Elliot, along with Victoria, stole $1 million from Costas. And this $1 million is important to him because it was the first million he ever made. He displays this money in his mansion in a travel bag behind some glass, and he uses it as sort of a motivational speech for new employees. Billy, who's still pursuing Elliot, works for Costas, and he eventually tracks him down at the place Elliot is staying. Billy shoots and kills a local resident in the fight, but Elliot and Victoria are able to throw Billy down a well, seemingly killing him. At this point, two other characters enter the fold, Detective Inspector Rogers and Sergeant Lemon. They are tracking down why a bomb exploded in a cafe, and they are trying to find Elliot because they know he's connected. By this time, Costas has had enough with Billy being unable to kill Elliot and return his money. Elliot not only stole his money, but his fiancée Victoria. And honestly, this might have been better off for Costas because Victoria was a confidence woman who rips people off for a living. She was planning on stealing more from him. This is little relief though to Costas, and he decides to fly to Australia and take care of the problem himself. After the fight with Billy, Helen is at Sue's boarding house with Elliot, waiting for Marco's phone to charge, and she overhears on her radio that Elliot is wanted for murder because Rogers and Lennon found Marco's body. Helen tries to arrest Elliot, but he takes her weapon off her and takes her hostage. After the encounter with Billy, Victoria goes back to her home, and Billy is there waiting for her, because the fall down the well didn't kill him. Billy is eventually killed in the fight, and Victoria grabs all of her fake passports with Spice Girl names on them. However, she slips in Billy's blood and drops the extra passports, so now she only has one. Because she dropped the passports, when Helen and Elliot show up at her place, they're able to tell her station to look for the missing Spice Girl that they didn't see in the passports that were there. so they can look it up on the database which monitors flights in and out of the country. Elliot and Helen bond in a Mexican restaurant over food and a lot of alcohol, and they wake up in the same bed naked together. Just then, Roger shows up at the hotel because an officer recognizes Helen's license plate. He tells Elliot to come out of the room, but runs into a problem when Lemon shows up and wants to call for backup. Rogers ends up shooting Lemon to make sure he doesn't call for backup, because he received a call from Costas showing him a video of his kidnapped wife, and he said he won't return her unless he gets Elliot. Helen ends up going out the back door, and Elliot gives himself up to Rogers, who drives him to Costas. When Elliot meets Costas, he takes the opportunity to drink from Costas' water bottle with the LSD in it because he's thirsty. Costas wants Elliot to show him where he hid the money, and Elliot takes them to an area outside the gift shop, even though he doesn't completely remember where he hid the money. The minute Elliot begins digging at a spot where the money could be, he starts hallucinating and dreaming because of the LSD. Through his hallucinations, Elliot begins to remember things like when he first met Costas for the first time, as well as Victoria. We also learn the bomb at the diner was meant for Marco, because he was supposed to meet with Victoria, so she planned the bomb to deal with him. Eventually the LSD wears off, and Elliot remembers where he hid the money, and he gets it for Costas. At this point, Victoria shows up outside the gift shop, and she says she has Costas' brother Dimitri on FaceTime, and then he isn't dead after all. This doesn't last long, however, because Costas sees that it's a trick. After Costas hangs up on the fake, Elliot takes Rogers' gun and a shootout ensues, and Costas is fatally wounded, and Victoria is also shot. Costas dies there on the ground, and Elliot puts Victoria in a car and tries to take her to the hospital, but she dies on the way. Elliot still doesn't remember a lot of people, and because of this, he ends up calling Helen after Victoria dies. Helen agrees to talk with Elliot, even though Ethan protests. Because he's a shitty husband, she tells him to go fuck himself, which is a satisfying moment in the series, because he treats her like garbage and he isn't good enough for her. Even though Costas died, Rogers is able to find where his wife is being held and kill the two people holding her. Rogers then tries to blame the entire thing on Helen and says she is the one that shot Lemon. Helen and Elliot are now on the run together, but Helen has an idea. The police identify Helen's car, and they chase Elliot and her to a cafe where they take people hostage in there. Helen calls someone and asks them to confirm something for her. What she asks for is traffic camera footage, which shows Rogers taking Elliot from the hotel after he shot Lemon. This proves Rogers is lying in his version of the events, and she sends the video to every one of the police officers. During the hostage situation, Elliot asks for a woman named Lena Pascal because that's the woman he kept seeing over and over in his dream. After the police take Helen and Elliot back to the station, they were able to find Lena, and she talks with Elliot, and she tells him that he made her and her friends into drug mules, and both her friends died, and they butchered her to get the drugs out of her. Helen, after hearing this about what he's done, looks away from him and walks off. She doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. But later on, she tries to reconcile the fact that this person could also give $1 million to Sue, the woman who ran the boarding house. In one of the final scenes, Helen texts Elliot a burrito emoji, which is a reference back to the night where they spent at the Mexican restaurant. And Elliot said the burrito was the best thing he'd ever eaten. It looks like Elliot and Helen are probably going to reunite in Season 2. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.